How are we doing, folks? Welcome back to the Nightmare Cabin. We're doing a retrospective tonight. A band that's criminally overrated, and on the good news that they've recently reformed and are currently working on a new album. As we speak, we're going to dive into Daath. A lot of people pronounce it Daath, but no, it's Daath, and it's a Hebrew word which means knowledge. So quite a bit of evolution over the course of 3 albums, 4 strictly speaking, but these are the ones that were released on record labels, and a bit of a mixture of all sorts of different things, really. So yeah, I wanted to do, I'll give a bit of a spoiler. My favourite album is the second album, The Concealers, and I wanted to do a podcast on this album back in the Gully and Joe days, and it was something we never quite got round to. And I wanted to do a retrospective on the band since the channel started. And yeah, now they've reformed and are working on a new album right now. I thought, well, now's the time to dive in. So obviously I've finished shift now, so I thought this was a beer. The way the bottle looked, it was in the beer section, and I picked up a cider by mistake. So it's nice, actually, but it's not what I wanted. But there you go. What can you do? Right, so let's get into it. Daath, what's really cool about them is they don't quite fall into a subgenre, which is a blessing and a curse, really. There are times when bands are rewarded for that, and there are times when it's a hindrance, because the record labels don't quite know what to do with you. And it seems to me that there was a lot of good bands coming around at this time. You had the whole metalcore thing, you had the new wave of American British heavy metal. The new wave of American heavy metal, which a couple of metal, and you had the whole metalcore thing. So you had like Lamb of God, Shadows Fall, Killswitch Engage. Then on the sort of lower tier, you had the sort of metalcore thing where you had Poison the Well, 18 Visions. Killswitch Engage kind of started on that, but kind of leapt over to the other way, and that kind of came from Vision of Disorder and bands like that. Then you had bands like Himsa that were kind of, you had the whole metalcore thing which kind of melded into a take on melodic death metal, which was inspired by At the Gates and the whole Sweden thing. So then you had bands like Darkest Hour and whatnot. And yeah, metal was evolving at the time. And when Daath came out, it was this was the first album I was aware of. This is on Roadrunner Records, I believe. This is The Hinderers. And they were kind of marketed as a bit of a Fear Factory kind of thing. It was a bit industrial, bit dark, bit gothic, and but heavy as hell. And yeah, again, there was a little bit of everything melded in, and I don't know. It looked like it couldn't just be sold as a package to a particular group of metalers, and I think as well they were just on a lot of package tours, and I think they were basically, you know, everyone's favourite support band, but they just never quite, for whatever reason, they never just quite made it into headline status, and that's kind of where you want to go after 3 albums, and I think it just sort of fizzled out. That's what I think happened, but that's all speculation on my part, really. Yeah, so at first the band put out an independent release, and that was called Futility. I've never seen a copy of it anywhere. I'd imagine if you can get hold of it, it's going to be bloody expensive, and it's going to be in the darker regions of eBay or Discogs. I did listen to it in preparation for this video for the first time, and it's an interesting album. It's kind of new metal-y, kind of experimental in a kind of strapping young lad, Static X kind of way. I think there's a bit of a Mr. Bungle influence as well. Kind of reminded me of, if you've ever listened to Slipknot's first album before they were signed, is it Make Kill Make, Kill, Feed, Repeat or something like that. And yeah, you can tell they're trying all sorts of stuff, and Daath hasn't quite. It's all there. They just haven't put it all together yet. So anyway, they get signed. Slightly different lineup as well on this new release. So you on Futility, you had the core of the band, which was Eyal Levy, Mike Cameron, and Emil Wursler. And then we get a bit more of a proper lineup on the. Michael Cameron did the keyboards and vocals, and Eyal and Emil. I hope I'm pronouncing your names right, guys. Sorry if I'm not. Handled the guitars and bass between them, and then they did the guitars, and on bass as a session, you got Chris Dale, Eric Sanders on drums, and Randy Hykster, I think that is, on doing the grand piano. So on the Hinderers, on this one, you've got a 6-piece lineup. You've actually got 3 different drummers on this album, actually. Let's go through it. So you got Sean Farber on vocals, Michael Cameron still in the band but just doing keyboards on this album. Emil, Eyal, both still on guitars. Now you've got on bass Jeremy Creamer. And right, on this album, Kevin Talley does drums on one song, who's been in Misery Index, Dying Fetus, Suffocation, Chimera. He's done the rounds. He does drums on one song for this album, but he ends up staying in the band until the end. But the rest of the album, on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs, you got Eric Sanders, who did the Futility album, and Matt Ellis does the first 5 tracks. So kicking off with Super Fudge. I think it's I can't pronounce it, but I'd say Super Fudge. It's about a trip to Cornwall where they discovered some local clotted cream fudge, and they had a jolly good time. They thought they'd write a song about it. But no, it's a good bouncy groove on this one. There's a nice little melodic bit in the middle, nice melodic solo. Pretty cool HR Giga style video. Good opener, really. It kind of sets the tone. From the Blind is a cool, catchy stomper. Cosmic Forge, the 3rd track, kind of has a bit more of an industrial sort of dimension start creeping in now. This is where the keyboard player comes in. Piano during the chorusy bits, which is kind of gives it a gothic feel. Think Dimmu Borgir sort of stuff. The sort of the mid one, the one with the boobies on the cover. What was it called? I can't remember that album now. Nick Barker drummed on it, you know the one. But yeah, it combines like a sort of a somber feel to it, really. Big piano, but it's got some real chuggy riffs. But it's big, and it's got a real sort of. This is where the Fear Factory comparisons come in, really, because it's got a real dark dystopian feel to it, and obviously with the HR Giga video and that artwork as well. You get the atmosphere that's being sort of conjured up. Is it Ovum? Ovum has got a real Slayer vibe to it. That's real nice and shreddy, really cool. They sort of swing back and forth on this album. It's quite a long album, actually. It's 13 tracks, and you kind of get. They sort of set the tone with the first 2 songs, and then they sort of swing back and forth between a heads down shredder, and then they go. The next song will sort of have a bit more keyboards in it, a bit of sampling or something, a bit techno-y maybe at times. And they'll be a bit experimental and a bit dark and a bit weird. And then they'll go back to shredding, and then they sort of bounce back and forth throughout the album. Above Lucium is a good little stomper as well. What one's this one? The War... Yeah, you've got a programmed intro on one of the songs. I'm trying to... Yeah, it must be this one, yeah. Born. What's the track list in here? yeah, Who Will Take the Blame? That's the one. Got like a programmed intro, kind of weird, kind of new metal-y. Again, I mentioned earlier, Static X, Strapping Young Lad, bit of Fear Factory on there. And then it's pretty straightforward, really. Goes sort of, that's the tone as the album goes through. But then you've got a track called Dead on the Dance Floor, and that's where things get really interesting. Basically, it's like a gothic. You can go to any metal club and put this on. You can see the goths dancing to it. You know, that's the best way I can put it. It reminds me of the song that the goths would dance to at the beginning of the metal night in the clubs I used to go to. I think it would have been a really good single. It probably done all right. I think it would have. It probably would have done all right as a single, but I don't think it would have done. It didn't really paint the overall picture of the band, because it's not really something that they expand on the rest of the album, and it's not something they really expanded upon going forward. So I can imagine if someone had heard that song who was into that sort of stuff, a bit of industrial Ministry or something like that, maybe a bit of Static X. They might have heard that song and gone, oh wow, like this is cool, and then got disappointed that the rest of the album wasn't like it. And then for the the shredders that would maybe listen to it would probably get to that song and go, what the fuck is this? But yeah, it's a put it this way, look, it's fun. It's fun. Like, I'm getting to the point in my age now where I don't really give a shit about how pure metal something is or something like that. I'm well over those hang-ups. And now the band have reformed. They've got to do it live. They've just got to. Title, yeah, the last track, The Hinderers, is a bit weird, but it's an interesting number, but it ultimately goes nowhere. But it does have some interesting parts. So overall, it's a good debut album. It's a good statement of intent. They're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what works and what doesn't. And it's an interesting album. It's a good album to listen to when you just fancy something different. And there's a lot going on. They're trying different stuff. They've not quite become what they're going to become yet. But yeah, it's a well-intended, good statement of intent of an album. And an interesting album. And it was different from what else was going on at the time. So I've got a soft spot for it. I do really like this. Now so Hinderers came out in 2007, and the next album came out 2 years later, 2009. This is on Century Media Records, and this is The Concealers, and this is the band's masterpiece. This is where things really kick off. Same lineup, pretty much, as the first album. You've got the same guitarist, same bass player. Kevin Talley is now on the drums full time. But they've dropped the keyboardist and got a new singer. And this guy's Sean Satorsky. Excuse me. So they've dropped the industrial thing. There's little bits here and there, but that can be put down to production and maybe a bit of sampling here and there. But yeah, there's no need for a keyboard player going forward. And yeah, like I say, we've got a new singer. I remember when the original singer left, it seemed like he was pretty amicable. He said like he, happy with what he achieved on that first album. Had a really good time touring. He travelled the world, but he wanted to do other stuff, and it was like goodbye and good luck. Right, now this is where things really get going. Imagine a boot, and you pull the laces together, and the whole boot just tightens up. That's what this album is. They've kept what worked and worked on it and expanded on it and built on it, and what didn't work has been dropped. And this is now a straightforward, modern, extreme, depends what your perspective on extreme is, but it's a good, modern, extreme flavoured metal album. That's a perfect mix of brutal riffs, brutal fast tempos, but going back between good groovy and bouncy sections. Everything's perfectly proportioned, everything's perfectly timed, good bits of melody in there when needed, and the song's just constantly flowing, constantly moving, constantly interesting. This is a perfect 40 minutes of good modern metal, really. death metal flavour. It's not a death metal album, but it's definitely death metal flavoured. Definitely death metal inspired. But again, they never quite fitted into a particular box. And funny enough, I remember reading this at the time, and I just found it on Blabbermouth, and I thought I'd just use this as a bit of a. This is the review at the time when it came out. It got an 8 out of 10. And yeah, it didn't. I don't know how much to read and what to miss really. Well, they said that The Hinderers is a well-intended yet ultimately directionless album, which I don't think was quite fair. Well, what they obviously didn't like is what I did like, but well, taking new singer and the loss of keyboardist and the procurement of Kevin Tully in full-time services, the real Daath has arrived, which is what I just said. But this is the interesting thing. The Concealer sticks out from the current crop of metal albums in a way that Rust in Peace. Yes, we're being mentioned in the same sentence as Rust in Peace. Stuck out 2 decades ago. Not to say that these 2 records sound anything alike, but Daath guitarists Eyal Levy and Emil Wursler are well on their way to becoming the Mustaine Friedman of their time. My comparison comes from the fact that Megadeth classic The Concealers employs a highly skilled twin guitar attack that delivers a blistering tour de force of riffing and soloing, but in a way that puts a steak before the sizzle. In other words, the duo place far more focus on the song itself instead of showboating it like the lads in Dragonforce might. So, yeah. Bold statement, but I think it was well justified. And those 2, I do think, are a great team as a twin guitarist team. And they, after Daath, they actually did an album together, like an instrumental album, and a guitarist's instrumental album. Can't think of anything more boring, to be honest, but it floats some people's boat, and Joe Satriani does all right out of it, doesn't he? So I'll be honest, I've never listened to that album, but I'm sure it's an interesting listen and worth checking out. I just never got round to it myself. So let's get into it. Sharpen the Blades, awesome song, instantly recognisable. Sharpen the Blades. It's fucking great. Again, it's got a little bit of everything. It sets the tone. Perfect statement of intent for an opening track for an album. Yeah, it's just good bouncy rhythm, shredding when it needs to be, good pacing, nice little melodic bit thrown in as a little interlude before the last chorus. Just, yeah, great opening track. Kicking straight into Self-Corruption, Manifesto. That sort of just slows down on the tempo a little bit and gives it a bit more groove. So you've had your face melted on the first one. Now we're going to rock you a little bit on the second track. Unbinding, what's the word? The Unbinding Truth comes back to the dark atmosphere, which I mentioned about the first album. It's kind of cool, slow part in the middle, cool melodic bit at the end. It's got a nice haunting atmosphere on that track, and that what they were doing on that first album's carried on here, but of course whittled down to what works the most. Wilting, is that right? Yeah, Wilting on the Vine, great song. Hypocrite, you're the one. Da 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 da. Yeah, I can't remember that. The truth is wilting on the vine. Good groove on that one as well. Good catchy number. Translucent Potency. It's kind of slower, mid-paced and chunky, but it's heavy as hell. You can pull. It's got this real sort of. You can do your metal face on that one as you're nodding along, but it builds up into like this bouncy, and but then kicks off with some good blast beats underneath it at the end. Yeah, like a sort of riff. Day of Endless is a good groove on that one as well. Good bounce. I'm pointing out that these songs might have grooves because the rest of it is just balls to the wall shredding and just machine gun drums. So anything with a bit of bounce or a bit of groove, I've made a note of. Poisoned Sorrow, if I've got that right. Yeah, we get a little bit Rob Zombie at the beginning of that one. Brings back blood on, it's not blood on the dance floor, is it? That's fucking death on the dance floor. I did blood on the dance floor. Look at that. This has gone out. I'll light it in a minute. I'm talking. Yeah, kind of Rob Zombie style intro at the beginning, and then gets heavy as it goes on. But yeah, and then that's sort of the album's climax. But then Incestuous Application is just like this 2-minute balls to the wall song at the end. Yeah, look, the album just perfectly melds together, and like I say, this is 41. It's a perfect album. You can't ask for more from it. They've nailed exactly what they wanted to do with this album, and there's just so many hidden interlooping little melodies and little riffs and just clever little bits all just hidden in the songs that baked into the cake, if you like, and they just reveal themselves more and more with every listen. And it's a superb album. It really is a superb album, and they're reforming now, and I would love it. I'd love to see a show if they did this album in full. Put it that way. I think that'd be fucking great. Then we got a few years later. What's that? 2009, and then on to 2000. Yeah, 2010. Just a year later, we've got the third album, and this is just self-titled. And when I said as well that where the first album, they kind of on Concealers, they kind of just dropped what didn't work, and I said it was like pulling up the laces on the boot, and the boot just tightens up. One key thing to note on that is that the Hinderers was 48 minutes, just over 48 minutes long, nearly 49, and then the Concealers was 41, so that's 7 minutes cut off at the time. That's a sign of what I was saying. And yeah, as much as I like the Hinderers, one or two songs could have been dropped from it, really. I mean, I think Dead on the Dance Floor would have been a cool way to end the album, and it kind of leave you sort of guessing. But the self-titled album kind of picks up where the Concealers, but they try and expand a little bit more. And bit of an underrated one, actually. I think the Concealers is still their best album, but there's some gems on this. And I think had the band carried on, this would have been like a bit of a transitional album. I think you would have had Concealers would have been the classic. This was a bit of a follow-up where we're not quite got to where we're going to yet, and then the one after it would have been a classic, and this would have made sense as the bridge between the two. But unfortunately, it would ultimately go on to be their last album for now. Same lineup as the last album as well, so we're hitting the ground running. One thing with this, the opening track has like this intro which sort of just, and then you have to turn it up before you realise there's anything happening. You think, is there something wrong? And then when it starts going, you have to turn it down again. But it kind of builds up this one and then sort of explodes into life. So it's a really good opener, rather than like with the Concealers and Subterfuge. They kind of just bang and come out. This one sort of da-da, ba-ba, da-da, it kind of builds up. So it's a bit of an intro, and then we get the opening riff, and then it kicks in. But it's a good. It feels like it's the first one where they wrote an album opener. But it opens up nicely. It's kind of big and grand and majestic, but it's a proper opening song. That's Genocidal Maniac. Yeah, it's nice and shreddy at the end, towards the end of that song as well. It's a nice melodic break with some industrial beats thrown in before when it leads you into the end of the song. But yeah, Double Tap Suicide. Awesome groove on that one. Needs to a nice shredding blast beaty bit as well. Accelerant as a sculpture. That final riff at the end as well was fucking awesome. Arch Enemy Misanthrope is the favourite of mine on this one. Again, dark and melodic. and yeah, really cool chorus on that one. And yeah, so it doesn't waste more. Yeah, it's a shame with Arch Enemy Misanthrope. It's a shame there wasn't more songs like that on this album. It comes quite late in the album, and I think maybe one or two more songs like it just sort of speckled throughout the album. Probably would have broke it up a little bit more. Like I say, Concealers was 41 minutes. This one comes up to 45, and it's 13 songs. So maybe another song like Misanthrope would have just strategically put in the album, just would have broke things up, because this album's pretty balls to the wall, to be honest. But yeah, there's they kind of concentrate on the brutality on this one. Cold Devotion is a Cold Balance. Nice solo on that one as well. Oh yeah, the really cool sort of sort of it's kind of like a Van Halen sort of solo, and it's really cool. And a Cold Devotion and the next track, NATGOD, basically lead into each other. Where one finishes, the next song opens, and yeah, it's like a two-part song. And then Terminal Now is kind of just like an intro, outro, instrumental thing. But really cool album, actually. I think this one doesn't quite get the love it deserves. And I think a lot of people, if you like this album, if you're a fan of Daath, I think spend a bit more time on this one. This one rewards repeated listens. But yeah, you've got a great little trilogy there, and yeah, Daath were a really cool band, and I don't quite think they got what they deserved. They should have got bigger, and I do think the band have become a bit of a cult band now. And I do think Concealers has become a bit of a cult classic. But you go on YouTube, you look at the thing, it pretty divides opinion, really. I mean, a lot of people do swear by this album. Some people say Concealers, some people say Daath. You tend to find that a lot of people that really like this album don't like these two, and the people that really like these two don't care much for this one. Again, I think so. That goes to show that there was a difference between the two. But ultimately, look, the band, do some gigs. They've got 3 fucking cool albums and a good variety of music to pick from to do a really cool live set. And yeah, you've only got 2. It's a bit of a. You've only got 2 because you had the same lineup on these 2 albums, but apparently they've only got 2 of the members that are in the current lineup now. I forgot to mention. So after Daath, half the band went and joined Chimera. Let's quickly look it up. Yeah, Sean, the vocalist, went on to become a keyboard player. Emil Wursler on guitar, and yeah, Jeremy on bass, I believe. Didn't Kevin drum in them for a while as well? Let's have a quick look. Let's look this up. Here we go. Right, Chimera. Yeah, the Crown of Phantoms album. Let's have a look. Yeah, Emil was on there, Jeremy was on there, and Sean was on keyboards. Yeah, that's right. And then Sean, the band split up, basically fizzled out after that. I remember even speaking to him going, "Do you ever hear of a band called Daath? Like, do you know whatever happened to them?" And he's like, "Yeah, they all joined Chimera. Like, just they're Mark Hunter's backing band now." And then I was pleasantly surprised to see that Sean cropped up in Sinsanum. I've never been able to pronounce it, and this is the first time I've ever had to say it out loud, so I've never really worried about it before until now. But yeah, this was a good little band. Obviously, Joey Jordison from Slipknot, no longer with us, God bless him. Sean did twin vocals on this album with Attila from Mayhem. A couple of other guys of note in this as well. You got the guy from Loud Blast, and Frederick, I forget the guy's name now, but he was in Dragon Force, and he's now gone on to join Creator. I'm not going to pronounce his surname, but yeah, Frederick, who was in Dragon Force, now in Creator. Attila from Mayhem, Sean, obviously. And yes, Stefan, who is in Loud Blast, is in them as well. And obviously Joey Johnson on drums. This is a cool black flavoured death metal album, I think. It's a nice way to put it. Somewhere between black and death metal. Bit commercial as well. Bit easy to digest for people that don't quite go in the deep end when it comes to death and black metal, I would say. But yeah, they did 2 albums and a couple of EPs. And yeah, so that's worth checking out as well. And yeah, it came this year. It was announced that the band have reformed. Only 2 members though. You got Sean back on vocals, and I believe, let's quickly look it up. Bollocks, I picked on the wrong one. Hold on. You've got 2 original members, but you've also, they're currently working on an album. Emil isn't in them anymore. So you've got Eyal Levy on guitars again, and Sean from the last 2 albums back on vocals. And recording an album at the moment with a drummer. I forget the guy's name, but he's been in Septic Flesh. I think he's been in Behemoth, but he's not recording an album with them. And there's another good band as well, I forgot to. But he's mainly known for Septic Flesh, so hardly a slouch. I'm sure he's done a good job. And yeah, they're going to reveal the lineup when the album comes out. So something to look forward to. A great time to recap on those albums in anticipation for this new album. And if you've never checked this band out, definitely look them up. You can get their albums now, I'm sure, for next to nothing on your Discogs and your eBays. Apparently, they're working on some reissues as well. So hopefully there's some decent bonus material, maybe some live tracks, who knows. But yeah, I'll if there's some cool stuff on there, or if it looks like it's worth getting again, I'll buy them again and show them off to you, give them a review when it comes out. And I think I've pretty much covered it. But yeah, Daath, check them out. Definitely check out the Concealers, because that album's fucking awesome. But you've got 3 really good albums there. Like I say, I think they're a really underrated band, and hopefully now, this time around, they'll get the recognition they deserved. So, thanks as always for watching. If you're new to the channel and this is your first video, your first viewing, welcome aboard. If you're a regular, welcome back. If you've made it this far, give us one of them and consider subscribing if you want. And stuff like that really does help the channel out. So if you're into the band, tell me your favourite song or what you think. And if you're checking them out, let me know what you think as well. Give us a comment. Little things like that do help the channel keep going, and helps me find new viewers. So take care, everyone. Listen to some metal. God bless you all. And I'll see you all soon. Take care.